Hi, everyone, and thanks for attending our session. Our session is called Bonus Prizes Inside an Open Pedagogy Toolkit of Learning Outcomes and Soft Skills. My name is Jeff McAdams. I'm from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and my co-presenter is Jeanne Hoover, and she is from East Carolina University. So background of our project is that Jeanne and I participated in an open pedagogy incubator in the summer of 2022. This was organized by librarians at NC State University. They had created an open pedagogy incubator on their campus several years prior and had many iterations of it. And then last summer, they opened it up to librarians and faculty from around the UNC system schools. Jeanne and I came together to work on a final project. And part of the incubator, they wanted everybody to develop some kind of project that is related to an open pedagogy resource that they could share out to the world. And that's what this project really is. And so our goal was to make it easier for educators when they're choosing an open pedagogy project to think about learning outcomes that are non-subject related, but are still very valuable and have lots of good skills for students, such as critical thinking, peer reviewing, information literacy, etc. And we think that these are often kind of invisible skills, invisible learning outcomes, and we're just trying to get those to be more visible and more incorporated formally into learning outcomes of classes and projects, so that the value can be expected and appreciated by both the students and the educators. Our methodology was that we started by reviewing open pedagogy projects that were available on the internet. And, because of our, listservs and websites that we've looked at, we found and identified several projects that had articles about them, or we found their projects, open. By their nature, open pedagogy projects are open, and so you can go and look at them. And we identified soft skills and other non-subject skills that we thought were very valuable, connected to the open pedagogy process. So, as a kind of the nature of an open pedagogy project, students are creating, they're reviewing, they're analyzing, developing audience connections. So there's a lot of these kind of scholarly communication or communication skills, information literacy skills, like I said. So then we created an annotation of all these projects. The annotation would be a description, some basic metadata about the project, and then the learning outcomes that we were trying to determine from that are related to open pedagogy. We used Bloom's taxonomy to develop, the right verb related kind of hierarchy of learning outcomes. And we also relied on the SMART framework to help us create these learning outcomes. However, we couldn't put a timeline or an expectation of how much of the resource or how much of the work gets done within the learning outcomes, because that's more related to strictly to a classroom environment. So the educator, if you're going to use these learning outcomes, we hope that you use the SMART framework to add on to these learning outcomes, to make sure that there's more expectations for the student in that way. We also identified the themes from the open pedagogy projects to make the learning outcomes like how they grouped up together. And Jeanne will talk more about how we grouped the different learning outcomes together based off of what we came up with. Then the last part of this project in this website is to cross-reference these things. So we have a list of open pedagogy projects, each with their own learning outcomes that we've identified. And then we also have a list of learning outcomes that are grouped together by different themes. And we wanted to kind of cross-reference those. So you can get to the different learning outcomes from the project, and you can get to the projects from the different learning outcomes. So we're going to show you some screenshots of the toolkit that we call Open Pedagogy Learning Outcomes Project. Below, you'll see the URL for our project site, and there's also a QR code, and we move our pictures up here so you can see our QR code there. Here's the homepage for the from the website, and you'll notice what we did was at the beginning is put our methodology out there so you can see like what this is and how we did it. There's also buttons for the learning outcome list, the open pedagogy example projects, and we also have some open pedagogy resources. In the upper right, we have some more navigation, including the About page. And the About page tells the audience who we are, why we chose to do this project, how we expect people to use this project, and then please contribute plea that Jeanne will talk about in a little bit. All right, so I'll leave it to Jeanne to talk about the open pedagogy example projects.
Thank you, Jeff. So this is the landing page for our open pedagogy example projects. To get to this page, you would use the upper right-hand corner and click on Open Pedagogy Example Projects. As you can see, we have a lot of variation with some of these projects. They have different categories that we have organized them under. So if an educator is interested in doing a project related to multimedia creation, ancillaries, annotations, they can look at the projects that we've grouped under these categories. And the hope with that is that it'll make it easier for them to incorporate some of these learning outcomes into a type of project where students are going to be creating a textbook, for example, or annotations. So this is one example of our projects that we looked at. This is the first one that we did. This is the open annotated bibliography case study. All of our example projects have a similar layout. So as Jeff mentioned, you have the description as well as a link to the project and the learning outcomes. The projects, they kind of vary on what information is provided. So in this case, we have a conference video, an article, as well as a link to the actual project. In some cases, there might just be a link to the blog post that it's from. And those are the resources that we use to help build the learning outcomes. At the bottom, the learning outcomes vary in numbers depending on what we identified. We do want to point out that we gave numbers to the projects. So in this example, the open annotated bibliography case study is project 1. So you'll see that all of the learning outcomes start with 1. And in this project, we identified 3 learning outcomes that we pulled out from it. And in the next slide, we'll kind of talk about that process. So as I mentioned, this specific case study has both a video, an article, and the actual project. This is the article that was reviewed for pulling out some of those learning outcomes that we wanted to identify. And to give you an example of how we did this, we read through the material. This is a snapshot from that article that kind of spoke to some of those learning outcomes that you saw. So I'm going to go ahead and just read it, and you can see where we pulled that. When the annotated bibliography assignment was introduced, I modeled to the students how to search for relevant content, how to evaluate the credibility of resources, and how to cite resources using Zotero. A rubric and the author and style guide were provided to students as well. Most annotated bibliography assignment submissions conformed well to the author and style guide, and the submissions ranged significantly in the amount of editing required. So in that first sentence, you can see a lot of our learning outcomes were based around evaluating information, evaluating resources and citations. And so that would be the examples that we would pull and then start to develop some of those learning outcomes related to it. So that was just an example of how we came up with the learning outcomes for these projects. Once we had specific learning outcomes, we started to group them under different themes. So some of the themes that we identified were information literacy, peer reviewing, collaborative learning, critical thinking skills, digital literacy skills. This is not an extensive list, but one that we're starting with. To get to these, you can go to the learning outcomes list in the upper right-hand corner and click on it. And that, if you click on one of these examples, it'll take you to a page that is a little more comprehensive. So for information literacy, we also divided it up within that theme. So you can see in this example, we have research credible resources, but we also have understand copyright, fair use, and Creative Commons. Under each of those headings, you'll find the different projects as well as the identified learning outcomes that would fall within those categories. So the example that we looked at, the open annotated bibliography case study, our project 1, the first learning outcome fell into research credible resources, which fell into information literacy. You can see that there's also another project that we identified that connects to research credible resources, and that is project 9, the open case studies, and 9.3 learning outcome ties it to the research credible resources. So each of these themes, information literacy, digital literacy, are going to have those connections to the projects and then also to the specific learning outcome. The other resource that we had was just a list of open pedagogy resources that could be helpful if you're looking for more information. We provided some materials on defining open pedagogy. We also provided some information on repositories, which is something we used heavily with identifying open pedagogy projects, as well as some additional resources like publications, etc. What we're really excited about this project is to grow it and to expand it and to make it useful for you. So we hope that you will consider sharing your own learning outcomes, either for your own project or in reviewing an open pedagogy project, make suggestions for new learning outcomes, new themes. We really hope that this will be a community resource that can be used. So we have a QR code and a link that will connect you to a Google form. So you can make a copy of this form and submit it to us. It gives you kind of an outline of what information we're looking for, as well as an example template for how to structure the learning outcomes so that we can plug them into the website. You can send it to both me and Jeff or one of us, and we will get it updated on the website. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we really hope you'll consider submitting information to the website, and that the website will be helpful for you. There is a QR code, again, to get back to the website, as well as our emails if you have any questions.
Thank you for watching, and we really hope to hear from you. All right.